Hi, how are you doing?
Econoalchemist. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good.
This is great. I'm so excited to talk to you, especially after reading your blog. And I've been really wanting to do also, Bitcoin mining. So thank you so much for coming to the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So maybe before we start, can you introduce a little bit about yourself? I mean, I know that you are doing like, writing some blogs, but maybe a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I've been involved with Bitcoin since December of 2018, so only a couple of years now. And I when I first got started, I wanted to build a Bitcoin ATM business, and I moved my family up to Wyoming,
Mm-hmm.
and that didn't really work out so well for us. So we moved back home, which is Denver, Colorado. So not far from where we were at in Wyoming. And, since then, I've been trying to figure out other ways that I can create a non-KYC on-ramp for Bitcoin. I think that's one of the most important infrastructure needs in the Bitcoin ecosystem right now. I have very strong opinions about KYC and how dangerous it can be. And I have very strong opinions about self-custody and how important that is. My long-term goals are to build the type of on-ramp for people that I'd like to see in the world. And in the meantime, I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about Bitcoin. I really like to explain things as I'm learning them. So all of the content that I'm generating is stuff that I'm sharing as I learn about it. And, I've had really good reception to the content that I'm creating from the Twitter threads and also the blog posts I've been posting on my website. And I just try to share as much information as I can and fill this gap that I see in between, like, the developers creating the tools and the end users trying to use the tools. I think there's a lot of translation that can happen there. So I try and understand how to use the tools and explain that so other people can follow along step by step and start using these tools too.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a little bit that you bought Bitcoin in 2018, and were you really focusing a lot about privacy before Bitcoin, or Bitcoin actually opened your eyes about KYC and privacy aspect?
Correct. Yeah. So, you know, I didn't really understand the full implications of KYC information when I was first getting started. I just wanted to get as much Bitcoin as I could. And every on ramp I went to wanted me to take a picture holding my license or provide my social security number, my birth date, my address, all of my information. And I handed it over willingly. And it wasn't until much later that I started realizing how dangerous that was. And then what really pushed me over the edge was when Coinbase announced that they were working with various government agencies around the world to help them with chain analysis. And that's when I really pivoted away from KYC and really started trying to figure out the best ways that I can procure Bitcoin without providing my personal information. And I've been trying to help share that with other people too. And so I've written a couple articles that are about my opinions related to the Coinbase announcement. And I just try to alert people to the dangers of KYC and the importance of self-custody, because I wasn't receiving that message when I first got started with Bitcoin. And I exposed a lot of my personal information to a lot of different people. And I wish I had never done that. I really do regret buying Bitcoin the way that I did at the beginning. So I try to be very vocal and advocate for non-KYC and try to get the message out clearly to people that are just getting started in this space, or even people that have been involved for a long time, but maybe like me, they didn't quite understand the full implications of KYC. So yeah, it wasn't until much later that I realized the kinds of risks that I was putting myself in by supplying KYC information.
Mm-hmm. So for the listener in here who doesn't really understand about KYC, so KYC is a know your customer procedure that a lot of company use, right, for anti-money laundering, etc. But maybe Econo, can you tell the listener like what is the danger of KYC actually?
Yes. So, KYC regulations are, and this is a matter of my opinion. In my opinion, KYC is a very invasive scare tactic that governments like the United States federal government, the US Treasury Department, they, through their apparatus called FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they enforce these know your customer and anti-money laundering rules on businesses that are involved in money services. And the idea stems from the Bank Secrecy Act, and originally was designed to prevent Americans from funding foreign enemies. But since the original inception of these rules, it's morphed into what we have today, where your personal information is being collected, analyzed, shared with government agencies, government contractors, private corporations. And what's happening specifically with Bitcoin is that the thresholds of these regulations keep getting lower and lower. There was a recent push called the travel rule, which, if enacted, would make it so that any money services business would automatically have to file a suspicious activity report to FinCEN for a Bitcoin transaction they facilitate crossing a US border over $250, which is a ridiculously low threshold. And so what's happened is these KYC regulations have turned into privacy invasion, and people are not being allowed to transact without automatically getting reported to a government agency. And when these government agencies start collecting users' information, like I said, there's the agencies themselves, which have notoriously bad IT infrastructure best practices. There's the government contractors that are helping supplement their operations. And then there's the corporations themselves. So, and I'm sure I'm missing some other parties that are involved with this, but you have at least three major honeypots of information. And you're probably familiar with the Ledger data breach, where this Bitcoin hardware wallet manufacturer had their database of customer information breached. And I think the number was around 2 million users. Their orders, details, their names, their addresses, was all leaked to the public. So for me, one of the biggest dangers with KYC information is the development of these honeypots. And it's only going to be a matter of time before either a government agency, a contractor, or a corporation who has this massive honeypot of KYC data gets breached. And this is the concern is even heightened more because as the demand for Bitcoin increases, the value of this type of information is also going to increase. So if one of these honeypots gets breached, then you're going to have your name, address, photograph, all of your personal details, and potentially your Bitcoin holdings, your Bitcoin addresses, and combined, those two pieces of information are going to create targets on a lot of people who are now being put in danger because some third party wasn't able to handle their information responsibly. We've already seen many cases of kidnappings and ransoms involving people who are involved with Bitcoin. And as the demand for Bitcoin increases, the value of that information is also going to increase, and criminals will go to greater and greater lengths to obtain that information so that they can do kidnappings and ransoms. So there's that danger. But then, there's another facet of it, and it's what happens when the government recognizes that their nation's sovereignty is now being threatened by Bitcoin, and they want to isolate that threat. I believe that they will stop at nothing to isolate that threat. And if that means throwing swaths of the population into prison to do it, then I think that'll happen. If it involves, you're probably familiar with the term 6102 order, where the United States government
confiscated gold.
Yeah, they confiscated gold from their citizens. I think at the very least, if a government really thought Bitcoin was a threat, they would go to the length of a 6102 order. And if your identity is attached to a Bitcoin address and Bitcoin funds, then you're going to be a target by your own government. So I think there's really two prongs to this threat model of providing KYC information to these third parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's very fascinating and interesting, because even in the early days, how the cypherpunks really try to focus on the privacy, and as we can see right now, whenever we want to buy Bitcoin, it's getting more harder, because all the exchange will ask for your KYC, and sometimes it's even there are multiple documents that you have to provide, not only just your photo or your passport, but maybe your bank statement, your address, and all these things. And yeah, that's also things to be considered for everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got this two-pronged threat model on the user, and beyond that, the effectiveness of the KYC data collection and the anti-money laundering policies is very, very poor. It costs billions of dollars annually worldwide for businesses to comply with these regulations. and those costs get passed on to the end user. And the effectiveness of these policies is very low. There was a recent article, I can't remember the guy's name. I'll have to look it up, but you know, he wrote a pretty thought-provoking article. I think the highlight was something like these KYC AML policies, they cost 100 times more than the amount of funds that they recover from illicit activity. So you've just got this very poorly designed regulatory environment that doesn't produce what it purports to produce in results, and it puts people at danger both from criminals, and it puts people at danger from their government as well. So all around, KYC is just a terrible, terrible thing to be going on. And the fact that the Bitcoin blockchain lasts forever and it's public for anyone to see, having your KYC information kind of intertwined with that is just a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really like things to be considered about, that's for sure. So let's jump into talking about Bitcoin mining. So then because of this KYC, you decided to participate in Bitcoin mining and home Bitcoin mining. And I think this is really cool because like even in the beginning, Satoshi Nakamoto talked about like, you know, if you want to get Bitcoin, you need to also participate in Bitcoin mining, right? Like to get like the rewards and then from the transaction fees. So maybe can you explain a simple steps like how to mine Bitcoin from like, you know, from your home for beginners?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some infrastructure that is needed, especially if the user wants to use the latest generation of mining equipment, which is called ASICs, or application-specific integrated circuits. And basically, it's just a really powerful computer. This ASIC computer usually ships from the manufacturer with very loud fans on either end of it. These fans are used to cool the circuit boards. And if you're going to bring one of these computers into your home, like I did, you need to be prepared to handle that much noise somehow. These machines or these computers are designed for industrial applications where noise isn't an issue, where heat isn't an issue, where circulating airflow is not an issue. But for the end user who wants to try and bring an industrial computer into their living space, they're going to need to be prepared to handle the noise and handle the air ventilation to keep the machine or to keep the computer cool. And they're also going to need to be able to supply the power for it, because these computers run on 240 volt power. And so there's some infrastructure considerations that people need to make when they want to bring one of these machines into their home. I hired an electrician to help me with the electrical work because I wanted to install this machine in my basement and I didn't have 240 volt power supply there. So I hired an electrician to help me. The relationship with my electrician didn't work out so well. Scammers are not only in the cryptocurrency space, they are everywhere in life. And unfortunately, I had a bad experience with the electrician. So I recommend anyone to definitely seek professional help if they are in need of upgrading their electrical infrastructure. but make sure you're using a licensed professional, and you should be okay. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, and you're proficient with electrical work, then you would want to run a 240 volt 30 amp circuit, at least 14 gauge wire, to power your ASIC computer. And then once you have the power, then you've got to think about how you're going to get cool air to the computer. And then these computers output a tremendous amount of heat. The one that I got outputs roughly 150 degrees Fahrenheit at the output fan. So you have to ventilate your space somehow. You have to bring in fresh air and exhaust the hot air. In my situation, I took out one of the windows in my office and used that to plumb in a 6-inch ventilation pipe to bring in cool air from outside, and then to exhaust the hot air back outside. A lot of people have creative uses for the heat. In my particular situation, I just thought it was best to exhaust the air outside and get the project up and running. So yeah, anyone interested in doing it needs to be prepared to have the ventilation infrastructure installed as well. And then, the other big piece of infrastructure is the sound. You have to think about how you're going to mitigate the sound that this computer produces. If you have a garage or a shed in your backyard, or something that's not so close to where you spend most of your time in your home, then it would be great to set the computer up in that area. For me, the computer is set up directly below my kid's bedroom. And so I really needed to do something to mitigate the amount of noise it was producing. So I got some standard construction materials like plywood, and I built an enclosure for the computer. And I built it so that it would dampen the sound and also allow the air to flow through it sufficiently to keep the machine cool. So it took some forethought and some time to design it and put it all together, but the infrastructure requirements for running this kind of computer in your home are definitely one of the biggest challenges. Technically speaking, setting up the miner is much easier than fulfilling the infrastructure requirements.
So in the end, if you want to start the Bitcoin mining, first you need to really consider all the infrastructure bit, where you locate it, and then everything like with the sound and then the heat before you start mining. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. You've got to think about the infrastructure, because there's a lot to consider. They're very, very powerful computers, and they're built for industrial applications, and you're literally bringing like industrial grade equipment into your living space. So you need to do so with careful consideration.
Mm-hmm. And what about like choosing equipment? Because I know like even just a simple of getting a new microphone or new laptop, it can be a daunting task. Like there's so many things to choose. And I know that with Bitcoin mining rig, there are many type of this machine, right? So how do you choose the right equipment? What is the indicator?
So for me, I wanted to get as much hashing power as I possibly could out of the machine. So I was looking at some popular brands like the Antminer S19 Pro. I was looking at the What's miners, and I think the two big companies in that space are Bitmain, who makes the Antminer, and MicroBT, who makes the What's miner. There's some other brands out there like I think it's called Canon. They make the Avalon, and the thing is, there's not a tremendous amount of competition among manufacturers, and interestingly, that's having an effect on the ability to add new hashing power or more hashing power to the network. At least I think that's what's having an effect. And in recent months, it seems that the demand for Bitcoin has really been outpacing the overall network hash rate. And I believe part of this is due to the fact that there's really just those two big manufacturers, and they cannot keep up with the demand, and any sort of logistics problems that they're having or delays in production really affect the delivery of these computers worldwide and affect the ability for companies or mining operators to expand their operations. So in other words, when you start shopping for mining hardware, you'll find that your options are actually pretty limited. But the thing I would recommend looking for is trying to get as much hashing power as you can out of the machine. I'm very happy with the WhatsMiner that I purchased, which was the M31S Plus. It hashes at about 80 terahashes per second. And the idea there is that the evolution of mining equipment will continue to get better and better. And in order to get as much useful life out of your equipment that you can, it's a good idea to get the latest generation and the best equipment that you can afford when you decide to start mining. So like this, you should be able to mine profitably for a much longer period of time. For example, the S9s, which were made by Bitmain, they were an industry standard, but they're last generation's models. And I think they hash at about 14 terahashes per second. And even though they're last generation's models, there's still many of them that are profitably mining today, even with the new generation of mining equipment coming online. I think that eventually those S9s will not be profitable and will probably be phased out. And the new generation of mining equipment will take their place as the next generation comes down the pike.
Mm-hmm. So do you also consider like the lifespan of this mining rig? Like you know, every electronical equipment will eventually, like, you know, broken and all these things. So like how to also take into account like the lifespan of this mining rig.
Yeah, definitely. That is a good consideration, because you want to be able at least to get your return on your investment for the hardware. The thing that I really like about the WhatsMiners is that the person who engineered the S9s, which were the industry standard for many years, that person left the Bitmain company, and they now work for the MicroBT company. And I believe that they were responsible for the design of the M31S Plus, the model that I bought. And you can see similarities between the WhatsMiner and the Antminer S9 in the single fan design. Single fan on each end, where some of the other Bitmain amp miners nowadays have like 2 fans stacked on top of each other on either end. So the S9s have a very long lifespan from what I understand. And I say that because even to this day, there's many of them still running. And so I think that the What's miners have a very good product, and it has a very good design. And I think that they're going to have one of the longest lifespans of any equipment that's available currently. If your electrical costs and the market conditions align, you should be able to return your initial investment in roughly a year. And the equipment should last much longer than that based on the lifespan that people are getting out of S9s that are well taken care of. I anticipate being able to use this equipment well past the next Bitcoin halving.
Mm-hmm. So when the next Bitcoin halving, you already put another side, like money aside to buy another rig, like that, like you to also take into that account, right?
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm anticipating using the same machine that I'm currently using now. I think it'll live that long and continue running because it's that well built.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, yeah, what do you think is the benefit of doing home mining? Because you hear a lot of people saying that you cannot really make any profit because uh the big Bitcoin mining farm, they are the one who got the rewards. But um, how a home miner can compete with this big farm mining?
Yeah, there's so much common misconception around mining. And I believed a lot of the narratives that I would be, for example, some of the narratives that I heard before I decided to start mining at home. Some of the narratives were you would be better off just spending your money on Bitcoin directly instead of spending the money on the electricity or the equipment. Some other narratives were you can't compete with the big companies that are setting up their operations near hydro plants or coal plants because they get their electricity so much cheaper than you could get electricity in a residential area. And back in November, I read this article called Mining for the Streets by Diverter. And I reference him on my blog. And I highly recommend anyone who's interested to start with his article, his guide, Mining for the Streets. I read that guide, and everything he was saying was opposite of those narratives. And it really made me stop and question what was correct, because everything Diverter was saying was not aligned with the narratives that I was hearing. And so it really made me stop and analyze the situation and do some critical thinking for myself. And the more that I looked into it, the more that I realized that the narratives were not adding up the way that people explained them to be. And so I decided to go for it and set it up. And, I recently posted a tweet on Twitter after my first month of mining. I received my electric bill. I'm mining non-KYC Bitcoin at home for roughly 75% below market price. A lot of people assume that when you mine at home, you're actually going to be paying a premium for the Bitcoin that you're earning, that you're going to be paying above market price. In actuality, what's happening is that the demand for Bitcoin is outpacing the network hash rate. And even if you have expensive residential electricity, you can still mine Bitcoin below the market price. Initially, I didn't anticipate the margin to be as good as it is. And I really had to like stop and double check all of my numbers, because I was literally in disbelief at how inexpensive, at how much value in Bitcoin I was getting for the amount of money that I was putting into it. When and so that's one part of it. And you know, the other part of it is that mining at home solves the issue of permission. It solves the issue of KYC information. It helps you understand self-custody and start taking that more seriously. So when you mine at home, you don't have to trust any third party with your information. You don't have to ask anyone for permission. You can just set up a mining computer at home and start earning non-KYC Bitcoin and have it deposited directly to a Bitcoin wallet that you self-custody.
That sounds really cool. I mean, like, there's always like this thing, right? Like when people see the price of Bitcoin going up, like, oh my God, this is like way, you cannot really reach that full Bitcoin because every day it's getting more and more expensive. But with Bitcoin mining, this thing can actually, happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the best way for people to accumulate Bitcoin is through dollar cost averaging. And when you mine at home, essentially what you're doing is you're dollar cost averaging through your electric bill to convert the money you're spending in electricity directly into Bitcoin. And you're not putting yourself at risk by revealing any KYC information to a third party. And the funds go directly from the mining pool to the Bitcoin wallet address that you specify. And you wind up earning Bitcoin at a much, much, much better rate than anywhere else you could possibly find Bitcoin.
And you mentioned a little bit about mining pool. So maybe can you explain to the audience like how a home miner can get this reward from the mining
Sure,
pool?
yeah. So, you know, the basic idea behind mining pools is that it's a lot of people working together, a lot of mining operators working together to pool their hashing power. And the more people that work together, the better their chances are of earning the Bitcoin rewards for solving the blocks. And when you join a pool, you know, setting it up is super easy. You open the configuration page for your mining computer through like a web browser. You just put the IP address in, and you figure out which pool you would like to join. For me, I started with Slush Pool, but there's a lot of different mining pools out there. And you create an account with Slush Pool, which only requires an email address and a password. I highly recommend using an email address that does not contain any of your personally identifiable information. And once you have your account set up with Slush Pool or whichever pool you decide, you just copy the URL that they specify into your mining computer's configuration page, and you save that, and you turn your mining computer on, and it lets the mining pool know that it's there. The mining pool kind of looks at your mining computer and decides how much work it can handle, and it delivers packets of data to your mining machine, and your mining computer starts calculating that data and sending the results back to the mining pool. And for the amount of hashing power that your computer is providing to the pool, you will earn rewards based on the amount of hashing power that you're providing. And it really just comes down to averages. So, you know, on average, with a machine like I have, or the mining computer that I have, I'm earning roughly 55,000 sats per day, which comes out to like just under 2 million sats per month. And that is strictly based on the amount of hashing power that my machine is able to provide to the pool. When the pool solves a block and earns the reward for that block, it has to go through a certain number of network confirmations before it's validated and can be spent. I think it's 100 blocks. And once it gets that 100 block confirmation, then the pool can release those funds to the mining operators. Most pools require a threshold, like Slush Pool, for example. If you want to take your reward less than 1 million Satoshis, or 0.01 Bitcoin, they'll charge a small fee for that. So I like to accumulate my rewards with Slush Pool until it is more than 0.01 Bitcoin. And then I can withdraw that reward without paying any extra fee. And so again, in the configuration file, you just specify the Bitcoin address you would like your payout reward sent to, and you can set the threshold so that it automatically sends the rewards to your specified address. You know, I recommend using a different address in between every reward, because reusing addresses is bad practice. And I also recommend changing the amount so that it's not always like 0.01 Bitcoin even. And then, you know, I also recommend taking your mining rewards from the pool and running them through CoinJoin implementation like Whirlpool to break the deterministic links to the mining pool. There's some considerations that, you know, in the event that we start seeing whitelisted mining pools develop, or we start seeing government regulations really crack down on mining pools, there's a concern that the mining pool's wallet, where the initial block reward is deposited first, there's concerns that that mining pool wallet can become a choke point. And that's why I'm really interested in the work that I may not pronounce this correctly. I believe it's pronounced Laurentia Pool. They're doing some work where the mining operators are paid directly from the Bitcoin block reward. It's called a Coinbase reward. And I don't want that to be confused with the company Coinbase. It's just what the block reward is called. And so the work that Laurentia Pool is doing is that when that Coinbase reward is awarded to the pool, that payout goes directly to the mining operator without first getting deposited into the pool wallet. So it kind of eliminates that potential choke point. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that.
So yeah, I mean that you need to also take into consideration the the whole privacy aspect as well, to make sure that this reward is untraceable as well. So what do you think is the threat for the home miners? I mean, like what do you think, let's say, if government look at your electricity bill and then start suspecting that you are doing Bitcoin mining? Is that going to be like a threat for you, or like what other threats for home miners that we need to think about?
It definitely could be, but there's a lot that would need to happen. First Bitcoin mining would have to become a legal issue, which right now it's not a legal issue. And I don't really foresee it becoming a legal issue, but it's good to be thinking about the possibility of that threat. So if Bitcoin mining at home were to become illegal, then you would have law enforcement agencies trying to enforce that law, and they would start looking for signs of infractions of that law, depending on what their priorities are. And if Bitcoin mining at home is their top priority, then yeah, they may start asking utility providers to share information with them about residential properties that have had spikes in electrical usage and constant increases that remain steady in electrical usage. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of watch the footprint you're creating. They say every contact leaves a trace. So when you plug the mining machine into your home, you're now consuming a lot of power, which can be indicative of home mining, which some agencies may be keeping an eye on at some point. Other threats I think would be sharing that information on social media or with friends and family. If word starts circulating that you have a Bitcoin mining operation at home, and people find out where you live, then they can reasonably assume that you have Bitcoin in your home or access to Bitcoin in your home through your wallet. And they may kick in your door and try to force you to hand over that Bitcoin. So I think if you want to start mining at home, you should really consider just keeping that to yourself, or sharing it with very few people, and not sharing that information on social media, especially if you're interacting on social media with your real identity.
So yeah, like maybe talking about the electricity bills, like what was the spike that you got before you mine Bitcoin versus currently? Like what is your average bill before, and then what is your average bill right now?
That's a great question. So I had a pretty unique opportunity. My utility provider actually has a program called peak demand pricing. And I think a lot of utility providers will do this. So you can contact your utility provider and request that they install a different kind of meter on your home. And this meter will charge you different rates depending on what time of day it is. The utility provider has kind of figured out when their local service area has the most demand. And they've developed these meters that will change the price of your electricity based on whether it's a high demand time period or not. So the meter I had installed on my home before I did this was charging me 12 cents in US dollars per kilowatt hour. And I requested the peak demand meter, and I wasn't exactly sure what the pricing was going to come out to because they didn't specify that on their website. And it was like 2 days after I got my miner up and running, the utility company came out and changed my meter. And I had to wait about a month to see what my actual electricity costs were. And with the peak demand pricing, my costs for a 24-hour period average out to 8 cents a kilowatt hour. So I got about 4 cent per kilowatt hour discount. And so I recommend anyone who's interested in doing this looking at their utility provider's website to see if they can get peak demand meter installed on their home. And so at the end of the day, I was spending about $150 on my electric bill before I installed the miner per month. And then this last bill that I had, which included 17 days of mining on the bill period, was about $220. So I'm anticipating like a full 30-day cycle with running the miner to be, somewhere shy of $300, somewhere between $250, $300.
So it's not that big of like a jump, right? I mean, like it's just like let's say an extra electronic equipment that you have running in your house, or like you're running AC for like more than you are currently using, for example, like that.
Yeah, it's the particular mining computer that I got runs at 3,500 watts. So it's a pretty decent consumer of electricity, but for running one machine at home, I don't think that would be a red flag to any law enforcement agency that's asking utility providers for that kind of information. And granted, I also live in a state where marijuana is legal, and there are a lot of people, suffice it to say, everyone in Colorado grows marijuana at home. There's a lot of power consumption going into producing marijuana at home. And so in Colorado, if you're running 1 or 2, even 4 of these Bitcoin miners at home, you're going to be a small blip on the radar in comparison to some other residential power users that are doing other things with the electricity.
And do you also consider like to maybe subsidize your electricity with like renewables such as solar panels or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea if that if your home already has that pre-existing infrastructure, then yeah, I think that's great. For me personally, I'm not going to go that route. I did look at solar panels, but God, I was going to have to spend like another $20,000 just to install the solar panels. So for me, I kind of shied away from that. But yeah, I think if there's something someone can do to help supplement that, I mean, why not? Like, take whatever savings you can get.
And maybe also the last question would be, what is your some kind of advice for people who want to do home mining, especially people in the developing countries like Indonesia?
Yeah, be careful of scammers. there's a lot of scammers in the space that will post very official looking websites. I almost fell victim to one of them myself. And I highly recommend the Telegram group, the oh God, I'm going to have trouble remembering it now. I think it's the
it will be in the blog that will be posted in this link, right?
yeah, it's in the blog, but it's the verified listings hardware market Telegram channel. I recommend everybody start there and try to find a deal that they're interested in. And even if there's a minimum order quantity on the posting, contact the seller if you're interested. Offer them a little bit more money for doing a smaller quantity. Try to work out a deal. You know, these guys selling the mining equipment in bulk, they're just regular people trying to make money like the rest of us, trying to do a job. Contact them. They're just regular people. Don't be afraid to contact them and offer them a deal. But I definitely recommend sticking to that Telegram channel. Don't try to buy mining equipment on Amazon. I don't recommend trying to buy mining equipment on eBay. I don't recommend surfing the internet for mining manufacturers. And actually, I found this out the hard way too. Like I had the intention of buying direct from Bitmain, and I set up an account with them and realized that they require KYC information to buy mining equipment. So it's better to buy it through a reseller who's not going to require KYC information from you.
So like what is like the red flags that we have to watch out? Like, you know, maybe the price is like much cheaper, or like what you said that you almost got scammed before. So what the things that, you know, pull you back from that deal?
Yeah. So for me, it was availability. So I found this website that said that they had the S19 Pro in stock. And I was like, fantastic. I found one finally. So I contacted them and they contacted me back very quickly. And they said that they did have the equipment in stock. And that's where I started hesitating. My intuition kicked in. Nobody had this equipment in stock except for this person who was very quick to respond to me and was very eager to have the transaction go through. They wanted Bitcoin. So I was prepared. You know, Bitcoin was trading at around roughly $18,000 at this time. And I was prepared to send them 0.25 Bitcoin for this piece of equipment. So yeah, they were just a little too anxious to get the transaction to happen, and it was just a little too convenient that they had this particular equipment in stock and quote unquote available, and it just made me hesitate. And I'm glad that I did, because I did some more research and reached out to some more people and asked some questions on the Telegram channels, and found out that was not a reputable reseller. So I'm glad I didn't go that route.
So again, come back to the Telegram channels that, you know, they can tell if that's reputable or not.
Yeah. So with the hardware market verified listings channel, the people who are posting advertisements there, they have to provide their KYC information to the like the person managing that channel. And you know, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're not a scammer. It's just that if anything goes wrong with the transaction, there's linkable information, and there's more. Anyone trying to scam through that channel would have much more to lose than they would have to gain. So that's why you don't really see, you don't see any scammers in there. They have nothing to gain by trying to scam people there. I bought my equipment through Blockware Solutions. They were great to work with. I saw them post an advertisement on the verified listings channel, and I contacted them and asked them if they'd be willing to sell me just one machine. And they agreed, and we negotiated a price. And, you know, I sent them the money, they sent me the equipment, and everybody was happy, and it worked out very well. Blockware Solutions also does hosting. If any of your listeners are interested in mining, but it just doesn't make sense to do it at home, they can purchase the equipment through Blockware, and Blockware will host the machine for them. They'll get a better rate on their electricity, and they'll earn the mining rewards from that equipment. So that's, I think, a good solution for people who want to get started but just can't do it with their current living situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wow, that's like really, really comprehensive advice. And before we close, I actually have a little question in my head about electricity again. So you said that you are, you try not to do, KYC exchange, but at some point you need to cash out your Bitcoin, right, to pay for the electricity. So how do you change that Bitcoin into fiat money so then you can pay your electricity? Do you put like your money aside for electricity, or do you transfer it from your Bitcoin that you got?
Well, that's a great question. And, you know, the short answer is that I'm not selling the Bitcoin that I'm earning from mining. So I'm paying my electric bill out of my pocket. You know, I have a day job, a 9-to-5 day job, and I use that money from that paycheck to pay my electric bill. But if I wanted to sell the Bitcoin that I'm mining, I would take it to the BISC network. And you know, for anyone who's not aware, BISC, BISQ, it's a peer-to-peer exchange where you don't have to provide your KYC information to a centralized third party. You can just post a trade to sell some Bitcoin, and someone can accept your trade, and then you make the fiat currency payment to your trading peer out of band. And once both parties have confirmed that the transaction has worked out, then BISC releases the security deposit that's required from both parties. They release that security deposit back to both trading peers, and the transaction's finalized, and you can move on. So I really like BISC. I recommend that for anyone who wants to buy or sell Bitcoin. Definitely recommend that over.
Wow, thank you so much. So BISC network, if anyone wants to do a non-KYC trading. And I think we can wrap that up for today's episode. Thank you so much, Econoalchemist. And for those of you who want to know more about your work, you can check Econoalchemist website at econoalchemist.com, right?
That's correct. Yep. And I'm also very active on Twitter, so you can find me there.
Yeah, and also find him on Twitter as well. So thank you so much for your time, Econoalchemist, and I hope you have a great day.
All right. Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the My Bitcoin story. Stay tuned for more episodes and click that follow button.